Umby here, back again for another recap of the GA VGC Draft League. Know we had a little bit of a break since our players were out of state performing at the Indianapolis Regional. I myself, I've been a little bit busy, so sorry for the late content, but I'm going to keep this kind of quick and dirty. Normally it's a little bit structured, but we're just going to hop right into it. Okay, up on your screen, week 6 results. Couple of surprising results, particular looking at Sanaito versus Professor Walnut. You have to check out the video to see how that one went, and we'll also discuss a little bit later when we get to it. But number 1 seed going down to one of the 2 matches that I mentioned Professor Walnut had to overcome for a shot in the playoffs, and he crushed both of them, so congrats to them. Alright, and this is going to be the last round where trades happen. Week 5 was the deadline for submitting any kind of trades. So the ones that are going through here, we're starting off, there are 2 players that ended up trading. We have Eeveenescence trading out Sylveon for Tapu Lele, and they're Galarian Corsola for Araquanid. Overall, a net positive. If you take a look at their draft, it doesn't add too much to the team. As a matter of fact, Araquanid adds a 3rd water type to the team that's not really capitalizing off of anything. Now it is good under Trick Room, which Gothitelle has access to, so it can be used in that capacity. But the Tapu Lele, I think, is a decent pickup for the team, especially for replacing Sylveon for it. One of the issues that the team overall has is, I think I mentioned this previously, they don't have a lot of strong attackers. Lele is one of them, and it can also operate next to the airstreams that Thundurus occasionally wants to set up. So it's not kind of like pitch and hold into like a Trick Room strategy to kind of outpace the opponent. You have some leeway there. You can even run like a Choice Scarf set if you really want to. And then we have Papi Cantan. They traded over their Heracross for Rotom Fan. This one, it's a little bit interesting. Granted, they already had an Airstreamer, well, the 2 Airstreamers with Latias and Kartana. Neither of them stab, so this allows for them to have a stabbed Airstream if they really want to. But as far as overall value to the team, it's a little bit up in the air for right now. I mean, that being said, the Heracross wasn't being put into use, and I think overall has lost value on the team. So it's not like it's a negative value trade here. Moving on to the matches themselves. Starting off with Shuckle versus Patillac. I think this one was a little bit of a toss-up for me, but I was highly anticipating it. These are some of my favorite teams, favorite drafts going into the competition. Particularly if you recall, I'm a little bit of a fan of Talonflame, so actually seeing Shuckle use Talonflame as their lead, it was Talonflame and Charizard, if I recall correctly, just kind of crushed the side of Patillac. One of the key things here, Celesteela, which has been such a force for Patillac, was forced to stay hidden in the back until the Charizard was dealt with. By that point, your Dynamax is already used, and when you get to the late game where the Celesteela is there, it had some opportunities to kind of close out the game, but it just wasn't strong, wasn't bulky enough to deal with the back end. So the upfront offense from Shuckle just shined through here, and unfortunate for Patillac, just couldn't, even though it was just by slight margins, couldn't really stand up in the late game. Next up is Bruneaux versus Luminary. Congrats for getting another one on the board. This one, so Bruneaux has been favoring this Silvally, and somehow, I'm going to be honest, somehow, has been being used to a really weird yet good effect. Now this week's version, they ran with an Assault Vest set, running Explosion, Psychic Fangs, Snarl, and Thunderbolt. So it's got this utility on so many different fronts. It's got the Explosion that's already shown usage from previous games in this competition. You got the Psychic Fangs to deal with the Grimmsnarls throwing up a Reflect or a Light Screen. and it just happened to be carrying Thunderbolt, which helped to dispatch Tapu Fini a little bit quicker than they normally would. And then lastly, just, you know, the ever so consistent Snarl that comes on an Assault Vest set. Outside of that, you know, they remain creative, you know, changing up their sets week by week, and also included Choice Scarf Blastoise to kind of help overwhelm Luminary. Now, this went to 3 games, so Luminary didn't go out without a fight, but they may have been just surprised by, you know, all the trickery that's on this team. And they also had trouble dealing with the Ferrothorn without the ability to reserve the Cinderace. So having the Choice Scarf Blastoise definitely helped out in that regard. Alright, now Strider and Esquire, we unfortunately didn't get a recording of that one, but you can see on their screen they're opting for a weather fight. And in this case, Strider was very likely to win out 100% of the time. Not only did they get control of the weather with Torkoal being slower than the Pelipper, but just having access to the G-Max Venusaur lets it survive the rain a lot better than what Raikou can do to survive against Sun. I'll say it that way. The Raikou doesn't have a lot of opportunity to really attack here, as long as Venusaur is in charge. And I'm not sure what the Obstagoon is doing here. I'm not sure what they were particularly afraid of. So it might have just been up to the first 3 Pokemon you see here, Venusaur, Torkoal, Rotom Wash, to really clean out Esquire's team. The Rotom Wash is really a good pick into Pelipper, even Kingdra to an extent, and the G-Max Lapras brought along. Really want to see this match to see how it played out, because I believe, just looking at the Pokemon themselves, it's an overall even matchup. But there's a little bit of an edge going over to Strider just because they can better maintain that weather control. Moving on to Sanaito versus Professor Walnut. Now, this one is particularly interesting because looking at the drafts and the Pokemon that Professor Walnut's been selecting so far, you expect them to be overrun by the G-Max Colossal and the Zapdos. The only thing mitigating at least one of those is a Pokemon he has yet to use until this battle, which was Slowbro, which makes sense. It's a bulky Pokemon that you can put in front of the Colossal, even max it itself. But then the question is, now how do you deal with the Zapdos? And Professor Walnut's answer is Wakanberry. So we have a Dynamaxing Lapras with Wakanberry sitting next to our previous hero, Speed Swap Ribombee. And Sanaito was just not prepared for it. This ended up in a 2-0. The flexible strategy from Professor Walnut just completely obliterated the early game. And the unfortunate part for Sanaito is, even if they can recover, maybe knock out a couple of Pokemon, including the Slowbro, they still have to deal with the Registeel on the back end. And there's very little on their team that's like catered to do that. They have the Torracat, obviously, that can at least put down perhaps a Will-O-Wisp. But from there, where do you go? Especially if you were carrying Politoed and you managed to set up a Rain. Even with the Slowbro, with it maxing, it gets the max geysers off, it's setting up Rain from there. So you're not doing too much damage, while Registeel still has time to set up Iron defenses, mitigating the damage from Flare Blitz. You're hurting yourself from Flare Blitz, and then eventually it's just going to body press you to death. So losing the star players with Colossal and Zapdos, or not having the opportunity to use them, kind of shuts Sanaito down. Alright, and next up, Eeveenescence versus Papi Cantan. This one overall is just a weird matchup, but shoutouts to both players using both sides their newly recruited Pokemon. So you can see Araquanid and Lele on Eeveenescence's side, Rotom is in effect on Papi Cantan's side, and they did make their debut appearances in the actual battles themselves. This one, it's still really hard to call. Papi Cantan looks like they're at a little bit of a deficit. Since the Meowstic, it can't use any offensive prankster moves, since Lele just sets up the psychic terrain starting from turn 1. What ends up shining through, though, is the Clefable. He's brought this Pokemon week after week. It's the offensive variant with Meteor Beam, and it's just been absolutely crushing some of the mid games in some of these matches. This one was no exception. Even closed out, I believe, game 2 with Dynamax. So, not sure how, if you can't handle that Pokemon, it's difficult to handle like the rest of the crew, especially if we're talking about an Excadrill with Sandstream activated. But yeah, apparently Clefable is all you need, especially when you start tossing out Max Rockfalls into the Raquanid, into the Thundurus, into the Cinescorch, and then you still have Stab Max Starfalls into the Umbreon, so you're kind of covered on all your offensive fronts that you need for this matchup. Okay, and here's a highly anticipated match, at least from my end. Mocha versus Bazuk. And this is one of those things where we kind of test the mettle of Bazuk's strategies. Do they have what it takes to kind of snowball starting from turn 1 versus such a bulky and well shored up team? The answer is unfortunately no. They're kind of shut down very quickly, including strategies such as the bulldoze into the weakness policy Metagross that we started out the competition with, and then we also had a Max Porygon 2 actually kind of slowing down the game too. That was very interesting. They kind of sniffed out the strategy that Bazuk's been doing with the Whimsicott and the Arcanine, the Protect Arcanine, the Tailwind on turn 1. And with a Max Strike already going in, that cuts down the speed of the Arcanine that wants to set up for turn 2 when Whimsicott uses Beat Up. Later on, the Dracovish tried to save the game, but Mocha happened to bring along, they have the foresight to bring the Credilli, activate Storm Dream, and just completely nullify it. So, once again, showing bulky offense is a really cool thing to use against hyper offense, especially if you can shut down 1 or 2 Pokemon at the same time. Alright, now we have our updated leaderboard for this week. Got Strider still trying to climb back up to their previous spot in the ranks, but Mocha with a huge game differential. I think that's the largest one we had so far to retain their spot as the number 1. And Papi Shuckle up here at number 2 as well. Impressively, I just want to point this one out again. It seems like I'm showing some favoritism here. Professor Walnut rising from a lower placement into playoff contention with 2 tough back-to-back weeks that they cleared without effort, 2-0s each week. Congrats on that one. Just want to go ahead and point that one out. And then everyone else in the middle, Sanaito, Patillac, they're still within range. They're still relatively safe. Have expectations for them to just go ahead and close out week 7 cleanly. Now, unfortunately, if we're going by this leaderboard, which keep in mind, this is not like the official standings. I'm just doing some record keeping on the actual win-loss ratios while keeping the games in consideration as well in case there are any tiebreakers. But if we're going off this format, there are 4 players that are no longer in playoff contention. So Bruneaux, Esquire, Luminary, Eeveenescence. They've just taken on a little bit too much water and won't be able to use week 7 to their advantage to move into playoffs. The other 8, though, they're fighting for their life. Bazuk is on the thinnest of margins and is actually going to have to, excuse me there, didn't mean to press that. They're going to have to not only get a 2-0 performance, I believe, but someone may have to drop down from the 5th spot, Papi, Cantan, and Professor Walnut, and you still have to be concerned with how well Patillac does the next week as well. So we'll see what happens. I'm very excited to see what happens in the very last week of this competition, and then we may switch things up on how we do these reports going into playoffs, but we'll get there when we get there. And you don't think I forgot about this. Here's your schedule for week 7 and my predictions on who will win. These shouldn't be surprising. This is actually closing out with some of the higher seeds facing off against most of the lower seeds, with the exception being Strider versus Patillac and Papi Shuckle versus Bazuk. Well, actually, no, there's actually a gap now. Excuse me, I'm thinking of a previous week where they're a little bit closer together. But yeah, like Sanaito versus Esquire, Walnut versus Eeveenescence, Bruneaux versus Mocha. There's a huge gap between the rankings of each of these individual players. So these results should be expected. Hopefully I have a higher accuracy at this time. But that is it for this week. Nothing too complicated. Just wanted to go ahead and get this one out there. Don't think I forgot about you. But we'll meet up next time, next week for the same report. Until then, take it easy. Peace.